Welcome back to our sequence on researching the need within the engineering design cycle. Today we will look at information we have gathered during researching the need that is only somewhat credible or not credible at all. Information obtained from less credible sources must either be backed up or retained for internal use only, never to see the light of day outside of the design team. Some information is in the gray zone and should be backed up with more credible sources. It's all too easy to skip this step in the process of researching the need because it takes time and it seems like we'll never get caught or questioned on a source that is marginally credible or not credible at all. But it only takes one critical eye in our audience to point out a piece of information we quickly took from an unauthored website to throw doubt over our entire design and rationale. Tedious as it may be, this step in the design process is very important to laying a solid foundation rather than resorting to a wobbly one. Sources that should always be considered carefully for their credibility include that obtained from company publications, including annual reports and web pages, newspapers, popular publications, blogs, discussion forums, and all web documents that don't come from a credible underlying source. Let's now take a look at several of these sources of information, with particular attention to how to sort or filter information from those sources between somewhat credible and those that are not credible at all. Many times in an initial web search to support the need for our design, we may find information from companies and corporations that seems useful and aligned with our cause. In general, in order to use information from companies and corporations as credible information, we have to do two things. First, we have to choose information that is likely unbiased, information that the company has no reason to have a bias. More on that later. Second, when using information provided by companies or other for-profit entities, our position will look more credible if we focus on companies whose name is readily recognized, such as Apple, Microsoft, Intel, and so on. When that's not possible, we can move to providing brief biographical data for a company whose name is not so well known, in order to establish its expertise and its place in the market. As an example here, we use Fluke. Although well known in electrical engineering circles, Fluke may not be a household term outside of those circles. The brief biography shown on this slide establishes Fluke as a long-standing and stable company whose role in manufacturing electronic testing equipment is clear and whose expertise in this area should be heard and convincing. Regardless of whether a company is a household name or has a biography which could make it a household name, information from company websites and other sources must be considered carefully. Some information may be clearly credible, such as technical data provided for a particular product or class of products. Other information may be clearly suspect, such as the company's stated opinion on the superiority of its products over those of its competitors. What company in its right mind is going to say that its product is not better? In general, aside from data sheets and application notes, company data should be avoided as a primary source of information. It is not convincing because it is likely biased and will be perceived this way by many. The one exception is when a company backs up what is being said with a credible source. In this case, it may be okay to reference the company website or other published materials alongside the backup source. Just remember, companies and other for-profit entities are in the business of making themselves look good. Honesty and bias are two different things. Positive bias toward a company's products is necessary for its survival and can be done with honesty and without compromising professional ethics. but that doesn't make the information necessarily well suited to the design that your team is attempting to push forward. For-profit organizations also provide additional information beyond what's contained on their websites and data sheets in their annual reports. Some of this information can be used as credible defense for our designs, and some can't. For example, let's look at some excerpts from the annual report for Acme Electronics. In an introductory piece, Acme professes to be the best in the business. Clearly, this statement, even though it may be accurate, is biased and cannot be used in our design team efforts. In our next statement, Acme provides its annual revenue. This is credible, factual, and usable information. Next, Acme tells us about their market share in 2014. Again, this is likely credible, relatively unbiased, and definitely usable information. But the next statement, where Acme makes itself the best candidate for future energy markets, is clearly biased and to be taken with a grain of salt. Let's move away now from information provided by companies to that information provided by an incredibly broad and often confusing range of sources on the internet and in paper form for general society use and reading. These can include print sources such as newspapers, magazines, brochures, and so on and so forth, or internet sources such as blogs, discussion forums, product reviews, propaganda, and on and on and on. Rather than consider each of these sources individually, we will just point out some common red flags here that can take these sources, no matter how valuable the information, from incredible to uncredible, and not to be used in our own efforts to promote and justify our own design. A common red flag relates to scientific principles. Some are timeless, such as Newton's laws, F equals ma, and others, but some are quite the opposite. If a technology or science is changing quickly, using a source that is several years old can get your team into trouble. Avoid these sources altogether. Another red flag comes with looking at the author. If a source has an author you have never heard of, or one that has no expertise in an area, walk the other way. For example, should you really reference information provided by Bill Gates on the inner workings of wind turbines? On the usefulness of Mac OS? Probably not. That brings us now to documents or information which have no stated author whatsoever. And unless you can back up what the mystery person is saying with another credible source, again, walk the other way. Unauthored information is very often uncredible. Lastly, let's take a look at what is often a favored and very useful starting point for any search for information: Wikipedia. Wikipedia by itself is not necessarily a credible source of information, nor an uncredible one. It all boils down to where the information is sourced. Fortunately, Wikipedia pages provide a list of sources that can not only be reviewed to see if the information on that Wikipedia page is credible, but also provide a great starting point for other credible sources on the web and elsewhere. We will conclude this brief overview of identifying less credible sources by stressing the importance of categorizing all the data and information we collect while researching the need. It only takes one useful and attention-getting nugget from Category 3 to ruin our credibility in front of an audience. So finding these troublesome sources and keeping them from the public eye is very important to promoting our own team's credibility and position to continue with the engineering design at hand. This concludes our discussion of identifying credibility within the research the need phase of the engineering design cycle. Thank you for joining us. We certainly hope that this session has been helpful to more thoroughly explore the complexities of credibility and that you'll join us again as we take a detailed look at other phases of the engineering design cycle.